In a way, Blizzard have given up. They've decided to just drop all pretenses and speak very directly to their audience with Diablo 4, because its 4th season doesn't have an in-universe name. It's just called Loot Reborn. And that's notable. The last 3 seasons have all had kind of moody in-universe names, but here it is them just screaming from the rooftops, hey, we're changing loot big time, please notice us. Blizzard clearly know that they cannot afford to have their audience not understand what's up. That's why they're making noise like this. They know that their day-to-day, week-to-week core ARPG players need to be reached, need to be won back, that they're all about the game system. So now the Diablo 4 is about to be 1 year old. Yes, time really does fly. Let's go and take a look at Blizzard's attempt to bring the people back. Brought to you by today's sponsor. Brilliant.org/Bellular News, where we're going to be leveling up IRL and where they have relaunched some of their content. So they are all about learning by doing, with thousands of interactive lessons across math, data, programming, and you can get 20% off an annual plan with my link and a 30-day free trial. So click that, and today the thing I'm highlighting is their relaunched data content. It's covering probability, exploring data, visually predicting with probability, and modeling with multiple variables, which is all like a legit amazing life skill. And what's key is that Brilliant does that via short quizzes with rich visualizations that make learning interactive and fun, which is vastly superior. I mean, there's one study showing a 6x improvement over passive learning of lecture videos, which to me makes complete intuitive sense, because for me, really, that's the difference between actually learning and just being bored and wandering off to do something else. So really, be it programming, data science like I've mentioned today, physics or maths, Brilliant has got your personal development goals covered. It is fun, it's a rewarding habit to build, and you can try everything they have to offer for free for 30 days at brilliant.org/Bellular News, or if you just click that link down in the description, and you'll also get 20% off the annual premium subscription. Right then, the pitch for this season is real simple. It is a full structural revamp to the game, in a way a fresh start. And what they want, I think, is what they've got in headlines like this. Blizzard just revived Diablo 4 with a list of changes so massive that it's practically a new game. That's from PC Gamer. And obviously, that is the best form of marketing, because they have changed their game in a way that is being picked up as newsworthy. That's real good, because it means they don't have to spend marketing budget or anything like that. It is essentially organic reach. So it's clearly working, and what's entertaining to me is it kind of means this season will have less new content. There is no standalone big, mechanical update for the seasonal realm that is tied to an ongoing narrative and a quest line. No, they're not doing that now. Instead, it is all about the overhaul to the core systems, and all of that reinforced by a minor narrative event tied to the Iron Wolves mercenary company. And even some of these events will actually persist through into the Eternal Realm, meaning that they're not seasonally specific things. So it's obvious what's going on here. They're near their 1st anniversary. They have a new expansion coming out towards the end of this year. What they want to do is reactivate their players and convince people who have seen negative headlines that now is actually the time to jump back in. And they do stand to gain a lot, because by June 2023, which of course was launch month, it had already been played by 10 million people. So that was a fairly big number, right? That's the amount of people that, even by then, they could sort of reach into and reactivate. But of course, since then, other things have happened, like D4 is on Game Pass. Game Pass has got in and around 30 million subscribers. That is a hell of a lot of people, and according to Sarah Bond, who is an Xbox executive, the Game Pass crowd have actually become the biggest single audience group for D4. So that's a lot of people, and yes, loads of those initial players will have been churned, but those Game Pass people, they're pretty new and fresh, so if they can be locked in via a real big update to core systems, that could be a serious performer for Blizzard. Of course, this is also in the context of there being a lot of competition in the market. You've got the likes of No Rest for the Wicked, which is a fairly different game, but also Path of Exile. PoE 2 is going to be a thing. There's games like Last Epoch, which are very much made for a certain subsection. So when people are playing D4 and finding out that it is the right genre, but it's not really exactly scratching the itch that they do have a wealth of other options. And that's where things have been interesting, because even if D4 is a profitable game and the store is doing well and all of that stuff, even if that's all the case, the perception with loads of players is still that Diablo is kind of struggling for the mind share of audiences. So that's why I think actually just going for a full perception change actually marking this as being a different thing by not having it be an in-universe season, by just calling it Season 4 Loot Reborn. That is them just directly trying to tap into that audience and reactivate people. So let's talk about what's going on. In a way, we're getting Loot 2.0 2.0. Of course, you may have been there during the original Loot 2.0, which was a part of Reaper of Souls development for Diablo 3. But anyway, right. Loot is what they are trying to fix. And one of the biggest problems that audiences had with D4 is that looting just doesn't feel great. Basically, just the way that itemization is, looting could be a pain in the ass, and you would end up just going through so much loot that it would just be a really big chore. And that's the sort of thing that they want to fix up. So the core principle is that Loot 2.0 is back. Here's a screenshot from 2013, and it is kind of relevant, right? Like, Loot 2.0 philosophy, less is more, items support builds, rarity equals power. That is not a slide from Diablo 4, that is a slide from Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls. And in principle, we are seeing similar things. I mean, how many jokes have there been lately about companies doing big releases for games and essentially through their live service, they've just been slowly working back to kind of where they were? That's definitely what's happening here. So this is from Blizzard. They say, the result is that fewer items will drop overall, but those items will be more likely to be valuable. They have reduced item affixes to 3 on legendaries, 2 on rares, so that's quite something. And affixes are now applied to players rather than enemies. As an example, base increases to movement speed, core skills, dropped items are now more simple, where tempering basically allows affixes to be applied onto weapons based on finding a manual in-game, and then masterworking is endgame crafting. It is basically boosting applied affixes and upgrading the rarity of those affixes randomly up to 3 times with options for resets. So the idea there is that there's lots of tinkering with your gear to get it to be the way that you want. Then aspects from legendary items, they are now just retained indefinitely, but in the codex, not in your base inventory. And the way it'll work is it will always record the most powerful extracted version of any aspect, and that can be used repeatedly. The way it worked in the old system was you would unlock things in the codex, but it would never be a good roll. If you wanted a really good roll of one of those things that was in your codex, you'd have to get a bit of gear that had a good roll and then extract the affix off that bit of gear. So that's quite a change. Then they say that on the seasonal realm, the codex will reset, transferring its stuff to the eternal realm and keeping any higher value duplicates. We then have rarity and power. So world tiers are now going to be directly affecting drop rarity, sacreds in world tier 3 and ancestrals in world tier 4, but some uniques can appear in world tier 1 and world tier 2, with all appearing from world tier 3 upwards. Uber uniques can appear as soon as you fight enemies at level 55 and at max eye level. And then for legendary item drops, well, they can be from any enemy that's over 95, and they will have a base power of eye level 925. Greater affixes then can't be crafted, they can only be found. They have, though, unique visuals and audio cues alongside 1.5x boosted power. And then gems. Gems have just been fully reworked, right? So normal gems now appear from level 51 onwards. So overall, right, the totality of all of this is that loot is more simple, it's more meaningful, it's more approachable. So in a way, it will kind of look like there's less, but then at endgame, there is far more player expression and customization with that gear, which should allow you to just kind of aim your way to whatever super busted build that you actually want to play. And it's that level of player control. That is really what people have wanted from these game systems. And looking at a game like, say, Last Epoch and the player feedback there, like what people have been excited about, a lot of that is player control, right? Player agency, over their gear, over their build. So all that stuff's kind of cool, but there are more gameplay updates, and to be honest, these look real good. So Helltides are being heavily reworked. The way that it was in the past, of course, was, you're killing dudes and then you're opening the chests. Now here's how they work. So number 1, they appear in world tier 1 and 2. The whole friction of the chests, that is now removed, right? It's just gone. Now the loot that the chests would carry, it just drops from enemies. And the way this works is that whenever you get a kill, you generate a threat score. And then the higher your threat, the more enemies will begin to target you. So basically, you kill dudes, to get more dudes to come after you, so you can kill those dudes to get even more dudes, and then eventually when you hit a high threshold, you'll be targeted by a Hellborn enemy, and that Hellborn enemy will basically be, well, a harder thing to fight that will get you your loot. And that loot is in the form of a baleful heart, and then if you get 3 of those baleful hearts and you place them in a ritual site during the Helltide, an extra Blood Maiden boss will spawn, which you can defeat. And then during Season 4, you may also get a Profane Mind Cage Elixir. If you use that, it will increase the level of all monsters in a Helltide by 10 and boost the Cinder drop rates. The other thing then is the Pit of Artificers, which is a repeatable late game challenge from World Tier 4 onward. It's got 200 levels, it's a time dungeon crawl where you're basically racing to beat bosses. Of course, harder bosses, faster you go, better loot you get. It is kind of what you would expect. And to me, it is just real funny. Like the way that this game launched to where it's going, and it does just remind me of Reaper of Souls. We're changing how loot works, and eventually I've got to imagine we'll end up with some system that's a little bit like Greater Rifts, but maybe takes more of an inspiration from, say, like the maps in Path of Exile. The thing is, though, all that stuff that I've just said, if you're a dedicated D4 player, you might already know that because it's all been playable on PTR. And that's been one of the big things, one of the big stories in this game, is continually things have been misfires. A real good example of that, actually, and a minor drama that's cropped up around this season, is the whole construct stuff from Season 3, where initially people just did not like the mode at all. Then Blizzard did a whole bunch of changes really quickly, and now it's at the stage where people are kind of sad that that mode is going. Now, they basically said that they are aware of that, but, they want to get things right if they're going to be an evergreen system. The core point, though, is Blizzard continually made missteps. Oddly enough, the PTR is actually doing a good job of reactivating players. Like, Rod Ferguson told IGN that they're actually seeing people on the PTR that were not playing the seasonal content of D4. I think that just shows you the reach that they've got, and how just calling it Loot Reborn instead of some sort of in-universe name has just very clearly communicated to people that this is Blizzard reaching out to them, not on an in-universe level, but on a more metatextual level, and that ultimately does seem to be scratching the itch that people had, right? Actually meeting their worry. So if you think about the 10 million players who were there in and around the launch of this expansion, you think about all of the people who've got access to this via Game Pass, this only needs to reactivate a few percent of them to actually move the needle in a fairly major way. And that's real important for Blizzard because, of course, the new Diablo expansion is going to be up for pre-order. Whatever they're doing here is literally the foundation of that expansion's loot system, right? And of course, on the more mercenary side, the better things are now, the better those pre-orders will be. And at least if some of those leaked surveys are anything to go by, oh boy, some of those pre-order options may end up being expensive. But anyway, now the PTR is finished, the patch notes are there, the feedback has been processed, and it's coming out on the 14th, which I believe is tomorrow. Basically, it's happening right now. And if you're wondering, is this working? Are people interested? Right now, signs are pointing to yes. So in places like the D4 subreddit, the general mood is actually optimism. And that, it does make sense. You just look at the sheer quantity of changes here and how it really does seem that the vast majority of them are very, very good indeed, and they're directly reacting to player feedback. It's kind of no surprise. And even marketing it like this is kind of admitting all the L's that they've taken up to this point, which again is going to mean that people actually feel heard. And if people feel heard, well, then it's going to be a lot easier to reach them with your new updates. So because of that, you got loads of posts like this one just saying, actually, I can't wait. This season is a new beginning for the game. And there's loads of posts like that. Genuinely a lot of optimism going around the content creator space. Also seen a lot of optimism. Basically, this has just been a really, really strong example of how to market your game in a little bit of a non-traditional way. And of course, because this PTR process has been positive, and the PTR will be, of course, continuing in the future, not only are people seeing, oh, we have a better foundation here in terms of the game systems, but because the PTR exists, well, we're going to be better at solving problems in the future. And I think all of that then gives a sense of hope. And that, I think, is one of the most important things for a game like this. I know that whenever we start to bring in words like a player's investment of time, I know that just starts to, it starts to seem like I'm just saying cynical business speak. But no, I actually do think it matters. at the end of the day, you don't want to feel like the sucker who invested all of your time in a game that ultimately is going downhill. So that's why this stuff is so very important. But beyond just those big headline things, there are also lots of smaller details and quality of life features that are only really being picked up by people now that the streams are over and the devs have actually been teasing them for the launch build. Things like you can now spur mounts in town, you can gamble for ancestrals before level 73. The Opal vendor operates differently, so it doesn't feel like, as terrible as an experience as it did. I'm just going through, again, people's reactions, like at least for one player, the idea that you can search your stash by item power, that's just something that they've been frustrated about since launch, and now it has been solved, and that will feel good. And that means the narrative has changed, right? We're not talking about a season where people are feeling miserable about the seasonal mechanic, or the seasonal narrative, or the lack of changes, or a season that maybe is good, but is still suffering from long-standing structural issues that are undermining any good work that does happen. Instead, now we have a PTR that's given the community space to soak in the big new features. We have an audience that actually feels like they are being personally catered to because small details are being changed, and then the devs are having the wherewithal to highlight those small changes, and where the entire news cycle has honestly turned a little bit into we're back. Again, I would say don't buy Diablo 4 based on this, right? Don't do that. Maybe wait for the new expansion, because when the new expansion comes out, the base game will probably be cheaper. Its content isn't going anywhere. It's not like this season even has a lot of content, so you're totally fine to wait. I think or maybe who this matters for, though, is people like me. People who have dabbled a little bit in the seasons, people who played a decent, like a pretty good amount of D4 at launch, but just haven't been interested. I actually feel like the chances of me hopping into the game and enjoying the systems and not being frustrated, well, those chances appear to have went massively up. So I suppose if that's Blizzard's kind of KPI, if that's the thing that they want to change in player perception, then fair play. I think they are actually doing that. The store still kind of sucks, right? All of those things, those still exist as problems. But aside from that, you have the game development staff doing game development, trying to respond to problems, solving them, cooking up new designs, and it actually seems that they've been able to do that. And that does make a lot of sense because, looking at what happened with Tango Gameworks, looking at what's happening just across the board in the games industry, specifically at Microsoft, it is all about doubling down on the safer bets, right? Focusing on the franchises that they know can actually move the needle. And I think that means that a game like D4 is safe enough where it's at a scale that it is a corporately important video game. So I think because of that, they're likely getting plenty of resources. I suppose I just wonder, in the same way that Loot 2.0, I believe it came out in the pre-patch for Reaper of Souls the first time we had a Loot 2.0, I'm just going to be very keen to see what the next expansion actually does with this, okay? Because if the foundations are good, like what is their new version of, say, a greater Rift? Rifts were fine, but maybe I'm wanting something new. Path of Exile players are always talking about how good the map system is. And I suppose lastly, where I would not have cared as much about the new expansion to this game, well, if the foundations are good and they're going to try to cook pretty hard on new systems for the expansion, well, I'm actually now primed to pay attention and to bother. Whereas in the past, I just would have thought, Diablo 4, missed opportunities, not for me. Pretty good stuff, actually, from Blizzard. Credit where it's due. We're harsh when it is time to be harsh. And of course, if you're going to be harsh, then when other good things happen, it is only right that you also cover those. Like, that's ultimately, you have to play fair, right? So that's the crack with that. Let me know, is this enough to actually get you interested? Again, it certainly does seem to be for a lot of the ARPG people that I listen to. So let me know what that's like for you. And of course, stay tuned. There will be content tomorrow because there's a lot of things going on in the industry. See you then.